This week, I got to take my first trip up to Cedar Point since 2018 and re-ride all of their coasters, with the exception of Top Thrill Dragster since it's closed for the 2022 season. There were quite a few rides that jumped up in my rankings, along with a few that fell a bit. I also rode Blue Streak, Gemini, Corkscrew, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, and Steel Vengeance all for the first time. So it's time to rank the coasters in this magnificent collection. Also, please note that Wilderness Run and Woodstock Express will not be included in this video as I did not ride them. Here are my top 10 favorite roller coasters at Cedar Point. First, let's talk about some of the rides that didn't quite make the top 10. Number 14 is Corkscrew, an Aerodynamics looping coaster. This is one ride I really only rode for the credit. It's very rough and can be pretty painful even when you know it's coming and try to brace yourself. I got off the ride with a minor headache and no desire to ride it again. This is one coaster that has simply not stood the test of time and just isn't an enjoyable ride experience. All that being said, this ride does look very nice when you walk past it, and I appreciate the historical significance it holds. It is nice to see that the first roller coaster to feature 3 inversions is still operating today. Number 13 is Blue Streak, a PTC wooden coaster. This ride was a little rough, but nowhere near unbearable. In fact, the slight roughness was probably the best part about this coaster. Other than that, I found this ride to be pretty boring overall. I have heard it gives some pretty good airtime, but I simply didn't experience it. I only rode this coaster once during my trip, so maybe I got a bad ride, but it just did nothing for me. It does its job alright for being the only wooden coaster in the park, although hopefully Cedar Point will get a nice GCI or Gravity Group coaster sometime soon. Like Corkscrew, I also appreciate the historical significance of this ride as Cedar Point's oldest standing coaster, and it does hold up pretty well for something that's over 58 years old. Number 12 is the Cedar Creek Mine Ride, a mine train by Aerodynamics. I thought this coaster was pretty enjoyable for what it was. It's a pretty relaxing ride and a good contrast to all of the super big and intense rides in the park. This coaster makes for a great family ride, or for if you want to take a break from the park's bigger attractions. My favorite part was the helix at the end, which gives some pretty nice forces to end off the ride. Also, this has the best setting of all the mine trains I've been on, so bonus points for that. Aero mine trains are one type of ride I'll never love nor dislike, so they'll always end up in the middle spots of a list like this. Just missing the top 10 at number 11 is Iron Dragon, an Aerodynamic suspended coaster. This is similar to the Cedar Creek Mine Ride in that it's a good ride for what it is. It's more of a family coaster, but it does have a couple of good drops, and the last part over the water is awesome. This is another coaster I only rode once during my trip as time was a little tight, but I very much enjoyed that ride. I like how different this ride is from other coasters, with the cars being able to swing freely from side to side below the track. It offers a unique experience that you won't get in many other places. Definitely give Iron Dragon a ride if you're at Cedar Point. Now on to the top 10. Coming in at the number 10 spot is Valraven, a B&M dive coaster. This ride was undoubtedly the biggest loser of my trip. This ride really didn't do much for me. The first drop is great and the hang time on the 0G roll is nice, but other than that, the ride is very short and pretty forceless. I don't dislike it by any means and would happily ride it, but when compared to the other stuff in the park, it just feels really mediocre and not up to the same standard. I found that all 3 of the other B&Ms in the park were a lot more fun than Valraven. And one of these comes in at number 9, and it's Rougarou, a B&M floorless coaster. I only got one ride on this, but I thought that one ride was very fun. The inversions were all great and whippy, and I've even found the enjoyment on some of the ride's simple turns. While it isn't the best layout in the world, it does hold up very well for being a stand-up to floorless conversion. It was also pretty smooth for the most part. Some might be puzzled how I could put this above Valraven, but I feel like Rougarou has a lot more to offer and does its job in general very well. Number 8 is Gatekeeper, a B&M wing coaster. I thought this ride was very boring and forceless when I came to Cedar Point 4 years ago. That opinion has changed very fast once I got a couple of rides on this trip. The wing over first drop is great and maybe even a little underrated. The rest of the ride features many near-miss elements and a variety of both positive and negative G-forces. Before this trip, Wild Eagle at Dollywood was easily my favorite wing coaster, but that race is definitely a lot closer now. I will hopefully get back to Dollywood at the end of the summer so I can get a more accurate comparison of the two then. It is also a beautiful sight to be met with when entering the park. Overall, the 2 rides I got on this trip prove that this is an awesome roller coaster. Gatekeeper gets a big thumbs up from me. Number 7 is Gemini, made by Aerodynamics. This coaster was a big surprise to me for how good it was. I expected it to be a little boring just based on looking at it, but I soon learned that this ride is far from boring. The first drop and the airtime themselves are both great on this coaster, but it's really enhanced by the dueling feature. Racing side by side with the other train brings the experience to another level, and unlike what I saw on Lightning Racer at Hershey Park, There is no one side that seems to win more often than the other. It keeps it interesting every time you ride, no matter which side you choose, whether it's the red or the blue side. It is also surprisingly smooth, and especially considering that it's 44 years old. Gemini is a great sleeper ride that I highly recommend you check out when you're at Cedar Point. Number 6 is Raptor, a B&M invert. This is the second best invert I've ridden, behind Montu at Busch Gardens. The back row is definitely the place to sit, as it allows you to feel all of the strong amount of whip on this ride even more. This coaster has it all: a fun cobra roll, some great corkscrews, and an intense helix to cap it off. Even the mid-course brake run didn't seem to kill the momentum, as Raptor rocks and rolls from the first drop until the final brake run. I feel like this ride can often get overlooked with all the other big names that exist in Cedar Point, but it's an absolutely amazing coaster, especially as an invert, and for me it's in contention for the best invert, not far behind Montu. And now we come to the top 5. These are the best of the best, the rides people primarily have in mind when coming to Cedar Point. All of these 5 are absolutely top tier rides, and it sucks that I have to put one all the way down at number 5. But the ride that's going to take that spot is Millennium Force, an Intamin Giga coaster. The sheer speed of this coaster is ridiculous and is absolute rush. The first drop is one of the best out there, and the view from Lake Erie from the lift hill is the best lift hill view of any coaster I've ridden. However, the name Millennium Forceless definitely describes the ride well for me. I definitely prefer more forceful rides, and this one just doesn't have them, and I couldn't bring myself to rank it up higher for any reason. Don't get me wrong, this is an absolutely insane ride, and the speed absolutely makes up for a lot of the missing forces, and I can see how it won the Golden Ticket Award 10 times, but it's just not my personal favorite. Number 4 is Magnum XL 200, a hypercoaster by Aerodynamics. When I first rode this back in 2018, I couldn't understand how anyone could possibly like it, and would have had it ranked close to, if not dead last in my rankings then. However, this time around, I came to really appreciate it. The ride is pretty rough, but the airtime is so insane that I don't even mind. I got to ride it twice in the magic seat, the third to back row. The jankiness of the ride plays a good role as to why it's so great. I really enjoyed the odd tilted bit of track right before the turnaround, and the odd shape of the airtime hills on the final stretch gives a weird and unique kind of airtime that I absolutely love. This ride is amazing, but it's definitely not for the faint of heart. Taking the bronze medal at Cedar Point is Top Thrill Dragster, an Intamin Strata coaster. After my visit in 2018, this was my number 1 coaster on the planet without a shadow of a doubt. Everything about this coaster, from the lap bars to the speed to the height, is just next level. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to ride this during my visit as it's closed for the entirety of the 2022 season. And to be honest, recency bias probably plays a huge role in this being surpassed by the top 2 on this list. The only thing about this ride that holds it back is how short it is. I wholeheartedly think that if this ride was longer and had more to it, it would easily be a lot of people's number 1 coaster. That being said, I will never forget how insane Dragster is, especially in the front row, and even after 4 years, it still holds up as my number 3 in the park and my number 4 overall. And I really hope these rumors about Cedar Point tearing this ride down aren't true, and I hope it's able to reopen someday. Taking the silver is Steel Vengeance, an RMC iBox coaster. Yes, you're seeing it, a list where Steel Vengeance isn't number 1. I had ridiculously high expectations for this ride going into my trip, and needless to say those expectations were absolutely met and then some. This coaster really does have it all: a great first drop, great speed, amazing inversions, and a seemingly endless amount of airtime. Not to mention it was super intense and smooth. It really is the perfect coaster. However, I had one small issue with it. While it is undoubtedly the best RMC, it does kind of just feel like a bigger and better version of some of the others I've ridden, and it does make the ride feel not as unique, which docked at a few points from me. And there was one ride that rivaled Steel Vengeance in terms of greatness and just had the edge on uniqueness. And that is my favorite coaster at Cedar Point, which is Maverick, an Intamin Blitz coaster. Wow, just wow. This ride is absolutely nuts. This coaster was already my number 6 overall and managed to exceed every expectation I had for it coming into this trip. The inversions are all perfectly designed and the quick lateral turns are so intense. Even the small first drop was way more fun than I ever expected, and the fact that this ride has a launch, and an intense one at that, halfway through the ride just knocks it out of the park. My first thought when I got off my first ride of the trip was that this ride does not have a single dull moment from start to finish. Even rocketing up the lift hill is great. This ride just has so much character, is an absolute stroke of genius from Intamin. Maverick is a masterpiece. Do you agree with my list? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. I intend to make rankings for other parks as I visit them, and maybe some other things in between if I get the inspiration. Thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your day.